So today we have ex-Garud Commando Kiran sir, who will be discussing with us his life journey from joining Indian Air Force to becoming the first Garud Commando, and later on doing multiple operations and also instructing the future Garuds. And how his life is currently in the civil life is something which we'll be discussing. So thank you, sir, for coming on the interview today.
Thank you, Akash. I am honored to be on your channel.
So my first question to you would be, how does it feel to be a commando in the say the best special forces of India? How does it feel to be a commando?
Well, yeah, it is a very, very, very proud moment, and it is a very proud feeling, of course. So, Garud are still growing, and when you say the best commandos of the country, uh, yes, I feel very proud when people say so, and especially in the past 1 or 2 years, many of our boys have done really well, and the kind of awards and posthumous or otherwise have come to the Garud Force, and I think the force is really growing very well. Uh, so I think it's very proud that I feel somewhere my contribution might be there in shaping up those boys. I still remember training those boys, Nilesh and Milind, and to remember just a couple of names. Uh, and so I really feel very proud to have been part of that.
So if you could tell us about your initial days before you joined Indian Air Force, like how did you decide to join IAF back then?
Well, so I'll start with my schooling days. I think uh, my dad was in the army, so I have literally grown up, listening to his stories from army, and uh, I have been always part of those children who always would want to be in the barracks of those guys in the army, because that's very intriguing, and it's very exciting for you as a kid, no, so to be in those barracks and see them there, see their routine, waking up at 5 in the morning, doing their morning routine, coming back, hurriedly taking bath, and in those times it was taking bath in the open, in cold water, and going to the mess, having their food. Everything was, a regime, and it was quite exciting, seeing those guys getting trained, and seeing my father training them. And after they all leave the ground, and it was we kids who would take over all those equipments, those obstacles and those ropes, and we were all monkeying around with those things. And I studied in Kendriya Vidyalaya, which was in Air Force Station Yelahanka. So I've been surrounded by this military environment all the time, and Air Force Station Yelahanka also a lot of activities have been happening there, and we were in kind of a secure environment and a regimented environment all the time. And so I think back of the mind, nothing was beyond military service. And then I finished my basic schooling there in KV Yelahanka in 10th, and after that I joined a pre-university college in Bangalore. And while studying that pre-university, I think in the second year of pre-university, teenagers, as we were, our friends used to see all those movements happening in and around Yelahanka. There were a lot of this military kind of units there. There was Air Force unit, a big air base, Air Force Station Yelahanka. There was a BSF training center. There was a CRPF training center, and all those movements and activities would happen on that National Highway 7, and in front of our colleges, and even army units in Bangalore used to commute through that way. So one of our friends, I remember his name, Muhammad Abdul Sheikh, and he always used to be very, interested in driving those Shaktimans. Those times those Shaktimans were there when we could see those the drivers seeing through the steering. So he was very much interested in, wanted to drive that, and suddenly I don't know from where he got the opportunity. He one day comes and tells me in the middle of the that second year of the course, that he's quitting the course midway and he's joining the Indian Air Force. And after that, he wasn't in touch with us, because those days no telephones, nothing. It was only letters. But then somehow we lost contact. And soon after that, I think I was as I said, I always listened to my father's stories, and I was much into this outdoor kind of an experience, outdoor kind of a guy. I always wanted to do a lot of things outdoors. And so somewhere therein was it was there in my mind, and I told my dad, I'm the only child of my parents. So I told them that I would want to go and join the military service, and particularly the Air Force. And dad, because he was a army guy, he didn't like it. And he was he from his stories, what I remember, he was part of all the wars which the country had fought since freedom.
Okay.
And so he never liked me being part of Indian Air Force. He always told, babuji banega kya wahan jaake. So and that was the image of Indian Air Force in the minds of those people, I believe. So but then I knew that I was not so strong and capable to be selected. And well, since beginning it was like I need to have more adventure. And I the more adventure is there in these lives of these soldiers. I always used to see them in barracks and doing all those stuff. And uh, you know uh, getting that environment was giving me a little high. So it was very clear from my heart that uh, I wanted to be a soldier. And dad told that, why do you want to be a soldier? Why can't you be an officer, complete your 12th, and be an officer? And uh, I told, yeah, that's a good idea, but then I have to study a lot for to become an officer. And I was in a hurry to be something. And well, I did go and attend certain recruitment rallies and all for army, wherein I wasn't selected. I was rejected for being very weak, for being underweight. And then in that process, this uh, A4 selection also came in. And it was more of a written exam which could be cleared by me. And physical is not so much as intensive as the army or the navy. So I got selected, and I told my dad that I got selected in the Air Force and I'm going. And then he asked me, what will you be doing there? What's your trade? I told I am selected as a clerk, and a clerk GD. He told, see, I told you, you will be an good for nothing babuji in the Air Force. And okay, but then he let me go. He never had any objections. My mom had some objections, but then yeah. But then after reaching Belgaum, that's a starting phase of all our airmen and ACUTs in non-technical group. uh, till that time I didn't know what Air Force was inside. I had superficial knowledge from my school days of Air Force, being from the outside only. After going there, I realized ki, where am I, what have I got into. But then I was enjoying my part of training. And with whatever little physical intensive training was there available, it was a little tough for me. But then we cleared the training. And then after that, eagerly waited for our posting. So this is how I got into the Air Force. Just before this getting into the Air Force, I was actually an apprentice, and doing my apprentice in a pharmaceutical company called Astra Ideal. Nowadays it's called AstraZeneca. So
Mhm.
I don't know where life would have taken me if I had been continuing there in the pharma industry. uh, but then life had different options for me. So it pushed me to the Air Force. And in the Air Force I continued. So
Good.
that's how I joined the Indian Air Force to begin with.
uh, you were the initial Garud. So you told me about the zero batch. You were part of zero batch. So what is the story of how Garud started? what was the purpose, and if you could just narrate the whole story of how the Garuds originated.
Okay, so this was somewhere in the year 1999, I believe, somewhere 1999 and 98. Uh, I was posted to one of those, those elite. To be very fortunate, while in the Air Force, I was always posted to unit which people would dream about. My first posting was with a strategic recce squadron, uh, with Canberra aircrafts. Nowadays it's not there. The kind of work we were doing there was really, really very exciting. Even though I was a squadron clerk, um, I never felt that I was just a clerk. I used to participate in every activity of the squadron. And uh, so uh, then I got posted to a very premier test pilot school here in Bangalore. It's called ASTE, or Aircraft Systems and Testing Establishment. A lot of exciting things happen there. And if you deep dive into what AST does, and AFTPS, that is Air Force Test Pilot School, does, so it's very exciting there. And the kind of work we were doing during those Kargil operations as well. Um, so I don't know if in the open source you might find how the LGBs were developed and how it were used during those times. So I was there in ASTE when this concept of Tiger came in. So it was called Tiger. And just before that, I was part of this Air Force adventure. And as my that maybe it is because genetics, so my adventure kida was always there with me. So that kida used to bite me every time. And while being discharging my duties as a regular HR person, I always used to participate in adventure activities. And this activity, at that time, this hang gliding came across. So powered hang gliding was very much in 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 then at that time. And I used to do powered hang gliding with couple of my the only other two people who were flying those powered hang gliding at that time in Indian Air Force was Sergeant Chitole and Sergeant Yadav. So I happened to be associated with them. And uh, along with me there was another guy called Sergeant Shameju. So we were a team of 4 people, and started doing this activity and started promoting aerosport adventure. And I started with powered hang gliding, but then because aerosport adventure had other things related to it, like parasailing and skydiving, and most of the people were interested in skydiving. And uh, to be very frank, our powered hang gliding activity was treated a little stepmotherly, because skydiving was more exciting. And I used to hate skydiving for that reason, and skydivers for that reason. And so I was doing all these kind of adventure activities when this concept of Tiger was mooted. And what I heard from my seniors and people, that Tiger was an acronym for actually tactical installation, guards and emergency response. And there were certain caveats attached to it. This was something which was not regular in the Air Force. It was something which was never heard of in the Air Force. And I thought, okay, let me be volunteer. Let me be the first guy to see what is there inside. And to be very frank, one of my adjutants, mm, uh, Sangeet, she was a flight lieutenant. I think she was the first. She was from the first batch of women officers, and she told me, "Kiran, what are you getting into? I mean, this will be a tough life, and particularly you have come to Bangalore to be with your parents." My father had some problem at that time, so I was
Mhm.
posted to Bangalore to on compassionate grounds to take care of him. And she was advising me that probably you should have a second thought on going opting for this Tiger. uh, I was very clear that I didn't want to be a routine guy. I didn't want to be doing routine things. As it is, adventure was there. I thought adventure will be there, part of my life throughout. I can be doing my discharging my duties as a HR clerk all through my life. And this Tiger was more exciting because I could do something more in that. And of course there was a lure of accelerated promotions and extra allowances and things like that. So I was very much interested in Tiger, and later on I was told by my seniors that the name was changed by PM Atalji to Garuda, to Garud.
Mm.
The Tiger name
Okay.
was changed, and so we volunteers, we had volunteered, and we all volunteers were selected and were called to Delhi for selection process. And so that's how the journey of Garud began. And
Okay.
what I heard from my seniors was this was the idea of one of the air chiefs, Krishnamurthy sir, who was then there, and he always wanted to have his own special forces for the Air Force,
Mhm.
and not dependent on anybody else. And he had a vision of having the special forces which would do so many great things. I remember one of the interactions when we were just in the selection process, and we were about to board the Garud flight, and we were just before us being sending to NSG for our first training. We had an interaction with Krishnamurthy sir, and he was telling me that I would want my Garud force to be like James Bonds, and he was having having this vague idea of having these Garud boys flying their own aircrafts, small aircrafts like James Bond, doing the activity, coming back, and having all these gadgetry with them. So that boosted us basically. I mean, he might have used spoke about all this just to moot us. I mean, to boost our morale, because he had learned that out of about 300 odd volunteers, I think only 150 were remaining in the initial selection only. So
Mhm.
maybe to boost our thing. So he might have told us all these things. But then we were also interested that chief of the air staff has got this idea. So if not James Bond, we might end up being something else, maybe something below James Bond, but then we will be somewhere doing something great. So this is how I know Garud started. So somewhere in
Okay.
2000, the files had moved to Ministry of Defense, and then we were sent to uh, uh, we were about 152, I remember. And unfortunately I was the oldest and the senior most. I was then around 29 years of age, and
Mm.
I was the oldest, and everybody was below 25, below. Most of it was just from uh, their training centers. So we were 152 who were pushed to NSG for initial training. That's how the story of Garud
Okay.
started. Selection from the training centers, having a fresh batch of Garuds from the training centers. So literally those batches were counted as first, second, third, fourth. We from the services who had volunteered were called in generally called as zero batch, because
Okay.
we didn't have a batch number. And
Mm.
the kind of result what Air Force expected never came up, because we were 152 who went to NSG, and I think only 14 returned back, uh, clearing that training.
Okay. Sir, if you could just tell us about your memories from the training days, and you also told me that you have trained a lot of the other Garuds. So, as an instructor, also, how was your life?
Yeah, so our initial training was in NSG. The first time we were sent to NSG, and our life changed the moment we got down from our buses. And we never imagined such a cultural difference would be there, such a different world altogether would be there. We never we just heard about Black Cat Commandos and things like that. We never knew what they were doing, and what was their regime and all. But from the moment we got down from our bus, the way we were treated, our life changed. And for about 3 months of training with the NSG, and only the I think only the resilient remained. The resilient 14 remained. Rest everybody were filtered out, and they opted to go back to their usual lives in the Air Force. And because Air Force, we were the senior batch, we Air Force also might have expected us to be in the shoes of the instructors and take the next batches ahead. At the same time, we didn't have all the expertise to be a special forces soldier, so the Air Force had lined up a battery of courses for us, a battery of training for us. And soon after the NSG, I was maybe a gap of around a month or so, I was sent to Belgaum for a training called Ghatak. And that was a different world altogether, because yeah, mentally we were made tough in NSG, physically we were made able, and we had a lot of skills developed in from NSG. So I thought it would be a cakewalk in Ghatak, but then Ghatak was really a Ghatak. And I remember that Ghatak 32 days of hell. It will never ever erase from my mind. I think young officers also, every young officer from infantry has to go through that. And many of I think almost all army officers know about Ghatak training. But for a person from the Air Force, Ghatak was something very different. And from Ghatak, soon after that, all of us were divided. Some were sent to the deep diving school in the Navy in Kochi, and from there they dropped out. Some were sent to somewhere else, and things like that. So coming back to my story, I was after Ghatak, um, I was sent to uh, uh, counterinsurgency and jungle warfare school in Verengte, that's in
Okay.
Mizoram.
Middle.
And we did that. Probably Air Force was trying to figure out like how to how to make these Garuds um, skilled in everything. And probably they were also learning along the way, like how to raise special forces, and what kind of
Mm,
training do these people need. So after CIJW training, uh, uh, a requirement of people to Congo came up, wherein the Indian Air Force was running a airfield services unit in a small town called Kindu in Democratic Republic of Congo.
mm,
And there was a requirement of a protection unit. So I I was selected and sent along with around 25 Garud boys, and we stayed there for an year. And my actual so before going to uh, Congo, there was a little training which I had underwent uh, with the uh, with the special group. It's part of the SFF, and so a little training there. And before I could be an instructor for the future Garuds, I was sent to Congo. So in the interim, what happened is GRTC was set up, Garud Regimental Training Center was set up in Mohammadpur, somewhere after Gurgaon. Then later on, it shifted to Hindon in Ghaziabad, and then it
mm,
had a permanent base in Bagpat, Chandinagar, a place called Chandinagar.
okay.
And so I wasn't posted in GRTC as an instructor, but then all these Garuds had somehow I had touched their career of being an instructor in some way or other in between this transition time. And
Okay.
mostly in Hindon when I was there. So generally I used to get involved in their physical fitness training, and whatever we had learned in other training institutes, we used to impart that, help in generating our own ideas and material for precise development and study materials. And we had got all those materials from various places. So this is how I was involved in Garud training. So I think most of it I can remember around 500 of those Garud guys would know
Mhm.
me as being their mentor or instructor at some point in their life.
So my next question is, we know about the para SF units in Marcos. They have a probation and all those things. So similar probation now it also happens for Garud, I feel, right?
Yes, it does.
So what are the qualities that is being looked into in terms of their physical capability, mental tolerance, or the spirit? What do the Indian Air Force look into that? when they select them?
Similar to what the army has or the Marcos have. They call it as a probation, and we call it as a selection. That process takes around 3 months, and basically, as you mentioned, uh, uh, physical fitness is of prime importance. There is a level set below which uh, the Air Force might not accept people. There is a certain level of physical fitness which everybody has to meet. More than the physical fitness, I think the qualities which is looked into is mental resilience, and the mental toughness a person has, a trainee has. So this mental toughness is what decides. So I think everything, I mean, being a commando is not only about being a superman physically, or having the abilities of Arnold Schwarzenegger, but then having your mental status right. So me being a HR clerk uh, could be a commando, as you call it, a special forces guy. I underwent training with the NSG. I completed Ghatak. I did my CIJW. I did the most dreaded one with the special group. And in every course, I think I have attained the highest possible grading, at least the A grading, which I have attained. And I'm very happy that special group even gave me an instructor grading. And I'm thankful to Colonel Sanjay Singh, a very decorated officer of the Indian Army, who was commanding special group then. He personally, congratulated me and gave me that instructor grading as well. And then to do all to complete our para training, and then do my stint in Congo, a war-torn country and a war-torn a place where everybody was ruled by warlords, and training with various special forces of other countries like US and other countries. Um, so in various exercises, I think it's all about mental toughness, which makes a commando, which makes or breaks a commando, or should I say, which makes or breaks a person to be in special forces. So this 3 months of probation or 3 months of selection is basically aimed at testing that person's mental ability to take on the vagaries of life in special forces. And if one comes through that, um, uh, then he's a winner. He, on the other side of that step, he becomes a special forces soldier, and in common language we call him a commando.
So we have heard about the term the special forces. So what makes, in terms of army, so Parasef or Marcos or the Garud, what is that special thing that they are called special? Is it just a state of mind? What is it?
See, special forces itself are not tasked with a general military task. So generally the military is known to do so many things which everybody knows, but then special forces are a set of people who are trained and assigned to do special tasks. Mostly they operate in small teams, and small teams because they have their own advantage of being in small teams. Small teams can cause a lot of damage while camouflaged, and large infantry units, which large infantry units may not be able to accomplish certain tasks. So just imagine the situation wherein recently you would have heard about this surgical strike um,
Mm-hmm.
by one of our para-SF guys. uh, those are not a regular army task, right? Those are not a regular military task. It has to be done by a specially trained, mentally tough guys. And of course, they will have their own skills in various aspects of special forces operations, be it navigating, or be it demolition, or be it anything else, be it mountain warfare, or uh, you know uh, uh, aerial insertion techniques and things like that. So these guys, these special forces do certain special tasks which conventional military is not expected to do. And these guys, being a small team, are expected to complete this with a positive result. So
Mhm.
that's why they are called special forces. And these specific tasks are short. These specific tasks are very important for the bigger operations which might be coming in, and these specific tasks are very strategic in nature. So that's why it is called special forces. And yeah, so if you look at
So,
even look at special forces across the world, the SAS or the Green Beret or the Spetsnaz or the GSC 9. So the all these guys don't do a regular military operations, but then they are a precursor to a regular military operation. So their operations might just proceed before a bigger military operations.
so I understand how you joined Garud. So currently, if somebody wants to join as a Garud commando, what are the ways as an airman, as an officer? So how can one prepare also? If you can just briefly tell us that.
Okay, to be in the Garud Force, nowadays it's a direct entry. There is a separate call for joining the Garud Force in the trade of IAFS, that is IAF Security. And officers do join Garud Force by volunteering while in service whenever it is called for. Earlier, there was an option for other airmen to join the Garud Force by volunteering. Probably that option is not available nowadays. It's only for direct entry, and probably that is probably because the way of Air Force life is such that people find it a little difficult to transition from being an airman to a special forces soldier, and that would take a lot of time and effort, and so Air Force decided to have it direct entry.
So in terms of officers, how do they select? Like, is there a particular,
The
say, only ground duty
officers
guy?
are basically officers of all branches are eligible, but mostly non-technical officers come on board, and they volunteer, and then there is a process of selection, and then they undergo the probation along with other IFS boys. And if they clear that probation, they are further sent for specialized trainings.
Mhm. Okay. I also asked you earlier a question regarding the batches that was won earlier by Garuds. It was similar to NSG batch, and then later on we have that winged batch. If you could just little tell us about that as well.
Before we had this current batch developed, designed and developed, we didn't have anything else to wear, and that was quite in sometime in the beginning when we had completed our NSG training, and NSG had permitted us to wear their batches on our uniform because we had completed the NSG, and it was a way of motivating other airmen to look up to us, and to see, to get motivated that you get something to wear, that coveted badge on your uniform. Otherwise you don't have any other badge in the uniform as an airman. So that was one way of motivating other airmen also, and to see that these guys are different from others. So energy had permitted, so we were continuing wearing those energy badges, but then soon we had our own badge designed and approved. And we have two badges, special badges. One is the Garud Brevet, which is a
Mhm.
wing with a you know the our national emblem on top, with a dagger in between. And we have a paratroopers wing, which we wear on the right side of the uniform.
Okay, so about the paratrooper. So how was your experience when you basically jumped out of an aircraft? How does that feel like?
Well, paratrooping, military paratrooping is a different ball game altogether. As I initially told you, when I was part of the Air Force Adventure team, I used to hate that activity just because my activity wasn't given any preference. But then fate had it that I had to be a paratrooper later. Military paratrooping is different from sports parachuting or leisure parachuting. So yes, I would say that a paratrooper really has that thing to be a different person altogether. It takes a lot of guts to be a paratrooper, considering the fact that you don't have a choice in what parachute you are selecting. You don't have a choice of packing your own parachute. You don't have a choice in you know in boarding desired aircraft or something like that. Sports parachutist has all these choices, but then a military paratrooper, considering the fact that he selects a parachute from a heap of thousands of parachute, which somebody else might have packed it for him with all safety precautions in place, of course, but then he doesn't know who packed it. He hasn't packed it himself. Then he selects a reserve chute from again a dump of thousand odd, reserve chutes. The reserve chute is his second line of defense,
Correct.
and if the mains doesn't open, then he only depends on the reserve. Even that is not under his control, and he selects those parachutes, having faith in the process, having faith in the system that the parachute will open up, it will save his life and get him back to Mother Earth. It takes a lot of courage. Takes a lot of guts. And before my first jump, I think I used to think all this, and yes, it is scary. I would say it is scary. It is still a scary experience. You pick up a parachute and go and stand in the ramp, and uh, I don't know, fate again. I was always the senior most in my stick, so I had the I never had the opportunity of being the second person. So I always had this opportunity to be the front person or the first person to jump out of the aircraft and stand at the ramp looking below at Mother Earth and waiting for the those warning lights to go from red, yellow, and to green so that I can jump out of the aircraft. And that's really scary, but then yeah, that's part of, you don't have any other choice. Looking behind, you have your juniors who look up to you, and you have the parajump instructors who will not let you
Mm.
stay back in the aircraft. And yes, so this is all about military paratrooping. It is really a game which is played by really mature men. So all paratroopers, salute to all the paratroopers I have interacted, and all the paratroopers of Indian Army, of the parachute regiment. They are really special.
Got it, sir. So coming to the next question, if I ask you three life lessons that you have learned from the armed forces, which you would like to even apply in the civil life, what would they be?
Well, the first and foremost is, it's all in your head. Everything what life throws upon you, throws towards you, is in your head. You accept it as a challenge, or you reject it as you can't do it. Sometimes you accept it, sometimes you reject it. You reject most of the difficult ones, you accept the easy ones, easy choices in your life. So as the military, or being a being in the special forces, has taught me that everything is in your mind. If you accept it positively, and if you think that it can be achieved, it will be achieved no matter what. So I never thought that I would be jumping out of an aircraft with a parachute from about 1,000 odd feet, without even knowing what's there inside the bag which I'm wearing in my back. I don't even know whether there is a parachute inside that. So, so that's kind of a mental resilience one should have. And yeah, the second thing I would say is military life teaches you to be respect life itself, right? Being an adventurer, before being a special forces, I was an adventurer. So I would say that being an adventurer, being a special forces soldier, you come out respecting life even more than what you had been respecting earlier. So I would say you start respecting life more when you have seen death from a very 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 near vicinity. So you see death every time you go for a jump,
Mhm.
and every time your foot is sticking out of the aircraft, and just before the second feet is about to leave the aircraft, you would have seen death. And till the time the parachute opens and you stabilize in the air, you are in the lap of death. and so you start respecting life altogether. So basically, so if I'm on the road driving my motorcycle, riding my motorcycle, I think I'm more careful, because I have seen, I respect life of others and my own life. So I'll be more careful while riding a motorcycle. I won't do all those wheelies. uh, I see boys do on a regular road. Probably they haven't seen, or they haven't experienced, nobody has explained to them uh, that how precious a life is. So that's one thing I would want to say, that you start respecting life even more. And the third one is, there is no challenge uh, which is tough. You just have to accept it and move towards your end goal, and the challenge becomes so easy. So I apply it in my job as well, because I don't come across people who are always friendly to me. I don't get situations which is always friendly to me. But even then, I accept certain challenges and try to move on. uh, and I have seen many of my civilian counterparts who break down, and uh, so in my close vicinity of interaction with my other colleagues in corporate world, I see them breaking down so easily. So I think the life in military has taught us to be more resilient and take more risks.
So as a commando, sir, the life, how do you balance your basically personal life, professional life, the emotional balance? So how was it as a commando?
While in service, it was
Yes.
a little difficult. While in service, yes, of course, seeing the uncertainty of your schedule, seeing the uncertainty of your a place where you're staying, and many people will have to forego their the so-called family life. Family life is being with your own near and dear ones when sun sets. That is what is
Mhm.
expected. But then, being in service, many people have to forego that luxury, and it is a little difficult to have a work life balance while in the military. But then when you think that military life itself is your, is your military work is your life, then it becomes very easy to balance. I see a lot of this work, this jargon as work-life balance in corporate world. And while in the military, this word I never came across. We never heard about work-life balance. But then now I can relate. I can always say that while in military, if your work itself is your life, I always enjoyed adventure. I always enjoyed being the unprivileged one. Unprivileged one in the sense like, uh, yes, I didn't get the best of food. I didn't get best of living accommodation. I never got the best of uh, transportation, right? I had always to travel the back of the truck, never in a car. So that underprivileged life I always enjoyed. So when I start enjoying those underprivileged life, or the life of the so-called difficulty, it was never felt that it was life of difficulty. It was never felt that I am underprivileged. I always enjoyed it. So that's how
Mhm.
military teaches you to accept life the way it comes, and make your uh, life more enjoyable when you start thinking that your work itself is your life.
Uh, so as a life as a commando, so you would have got few setbacks, few failures. So and even in civil life. So how do you handle such setbacks or failure in life?
Yeah, while in I mean, it hurts. It does hurt when you have a setback. It hurts when you have a failure. It definitely hurts while back in the armed forces itself. Because I was the senior most in one of the Garud flight, 608 Garud flight, I would want to mention. All those 51 guys would look up to me, and for all their problem, including their personal problems, and if I am unable to help it, yeah, I feel a little uh, uh, laid back, or feel a little sad that something could not be achieved. There were setbacks when these boys were even deployed for certain operations in anti-Naxal areas, and they had to endure so many difficult things. They would call me up from there, that they are would share their difficult times with me. So being a senior and being a father figure to them, it was really hurting you. It used to hurt. And in corporate world also, so failure does come when things don't happen the way you perceive it to happen. So
Mhm.
you either leave it and move forward, or think about it and start whining about it all the time. So the best thing I have learned is, if something is not happening the way you want it and it's not under your control, forget about it and move on, and take on the next target, take on the next work which gives you that high of achievement. Probably you
Mhm.
can come back to the same one later on, when the environment is conducive enough to give you all that energy and strength to complete it.
Coming to armed forces, it's all about the teamwork, the group. So what exactly do you understand by the teamwork, the perspective in armed forces and civil life? How important is it?
I think everything is dependent on your team. Everything, what you do, what you don't do, uh, every training activity, every small operation is dependent on your team, and the success of your operation is dependent on the successful cohesion within the team, the cohesion within the team members, um, the respect they have for the leader, and vice versa. Belief in their capabilities, and belief in each and every team member. So you have to have that belief first. And in corporate world, it's the same thing. Certain things fail just because um, there is a lack of leadership skill, which bestows that, you know uh, empower that team with all that what is needed. Most of the leaders fail, or the teams fail, because the leader wouldn't have had that belief in the team. And so that's how I feel that, be it military or be it a corporate world, a teamwork, if something has to be achieved in a team, a team has to be cohesive. It has to be cohesive. And in military, it gives a lot of chances to live together, to eat together, to share your pain together. So we don't call our parents of our colleagues as your father or your mother. I would address my juniors, mom and dad, as mom and dad itself. They were no
Mhm.
different for me. So this is how cohesion is built in the armed forces. So I never I mean, if somebody's brother is his brother, I don't call him your brother. I always called him by name, as if he is my brother. So
Mhm.
this is how we build up relationships and cohesion in the team, in the special
Mhm.
forces. That's, at least I would do that in within my circle.
So my last question to you would be like, what would be your message to the youngsters in terms of their priority? The youngster, I mean, say age between 20 and 25. What priority should they have in their life?
Well, everybody will have their own priorities, or they would want to reach somewhere,
Mhm.
right? And especially I would want to talk about those boys who always want to be in the armed forces.
Mhm.
That's a fantastic place to be, if you can. And if you don't have any other liability in your life, please be armed part of the armed forces in any ways you like. Right? It's not only necessary that you have to be an officer. You can be a soldier as well. You can enjoy being a soldier. You can you can achieve what you want in your life, being a soldier. So if you get a chance to be an officer, nothing like it, be an officer. But if you miss out on the chance of being an officer, at least try to be be a soldier, and you don't have anything to lose. You can enjoy each and every aspect of it when you feel that you are doing every bit you are doing, every day you spend in the armed forces is towards your country. And definitely your question is more generic, I believe. So the present day generation, I think they are a fantastic lot, a fantastic lot. And they have a lot of energy, they have a lot of idea. And I think they have the ability of taking our country to the next step, wherein the world looks up to our country back and say that they look up to India with awe, and that uh, uh, sense of respect which these youngsters are really capable of. They are achievers in every university around the world where they have been achievers in whatever entrepreneurship they have been into. And see our entrepreneurs like the Bansals and others who have set up such a beautiful legacy for us to take it forward, for other youngsters to take it forward. And I think our technical knowledge or the technical education is well placed to keep arm all our youngsters with the right skills to take our country to the next level. And I
Mhm.
only wish that in future we won't have to buy a Rafale, we won't have to buy a 6 or rifle. I think we should be
Mhm.
able to make everything what we need within our country. And maybe the others should be envious and should be able to uh, seek our permission to buy our
Mhm.
items. That should be the aim, probably.
Mhm.
And I would have loved to use our own weapons. I always loved Tevor. That's a different part. But then, had it had a Indian name, I would have been more happier. So our
Mhm.
youngsters are doing great. I think in another couple of years, we will have these youngsters who are still in college, who will take over the reins of industry and take our country to the next level possible.
So it was really nice talking to you, exchanging your ideas of how you look at life and the life in military. It was really nice talking to you, understanding all those things. So thanks again, sir, for your time and sharing your valuable experience with all of us.
Thanks, Akash, and love talking to you. And as I understand from you, you are also aspiring to be in the armed forces. I wish you all the best, and never lose hope. Keep trying. If you don't even make it to the armed forces, not a problem. You are still a soldier for the country. You can be a soldier for the country in many other ways, right? So I wish you all the best and keep inspiring all other youngsters. You have a lot of information about our armed forces. Well, I haven't spoken much deeper insight into our armed forces and what we do, but you have gathered lot many offline when we spoke. I understand that you have a lot of information about our armed forces and their units and what they do. So definitely, every youngster, every person in the country is supposed to know all these things and be proud of their armed forces, and help these soldiers also to have that respect. When I remember, it's only since Kargil war that
Uh-huh.
people sat up and took notice of what the soldiers were doing, especially in my part of the world. And after that, it has been growing. The respect for soldiers has been growing tremendously, and
Mhm.
I really am heartened. And and I really feel that this is the time I should have been there. Uh, with the armed forces, and enjoy that respect from my countrymen. But then, nevertheless, I'm still enjoying the respect what I get for being a veteran. And so, wish you all the best, and do continue to do the good job what you're doing, and please excel in whatever you are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Have a nice day, sir. Jai Hind.
Yeah, you too. Jai Hind.